Rolf De Heer, Molly Reynolds, thank you so much for turning up on this beautiful day. Congratulations on Another Country. So let me start off with a compliment that's going to sound like an insult. You know how long it looks like it took you to make this movie? About 2 days, including maybe an hour or so for the voiceover. Describe the style of this documentary for us.
Oh, well, I'm still recovering from the 2 days because it took Matt Netheim, the cinematographer, and I 6 weeks, and then we went back after 3 months in the edit suite for a couple of weeks of pickups. It comes about for two reasons. One, I think, is the nature of the way in which Matt works. He actually becomes invisible. So he'll just sort of disappear into the crowd, even though he's a white fella and the mob, are all black fellas, and is just able to document things so he's invisible. I think another thing is that Rolf and I have a relationship with the community that spans for over a decade, and there's a lot of trust between us, and so that means when I go up to people like Bobby and Billy, who I've known for some time, and say, do you mind if we spend some time with you? They go, yeah, sure, and they trust us with what we do.
It's a very elemental style. It brings one in mind of Fred Wiseman's work, which is very observational.
Yeah, cinema verite style. Yeah.
Why that style, though?
I think that culturally that style very much suits the culture. In one part of the documentary, they say, well, we're Yolngu, we are patient, we have plenty of time, and I think that style very much suits the culture. What would you say, Rolf?
And I think the additional thing about the relaxed shooting style as it appears in the final film,
it's deceptively it's simple.
It's to do with communication, and when you have David talking about ideas that sometimes are quite complex. The visuals are so strong that if you were cutting and doing a lot with them, you wouldn't understand what he was saying. And so the two would begin to fight with each other.
Okay, why this documentary? Why now?
Oh, goodness. I think this is potentially, it is one of potentially many documentaries. Why now? Because circumstance has presented and allowed for it to be so. I think that I could and I could go back into Ramingining another half a dozen times and come out with a different documentary each and every time.
I'm sorry, what circumstances have allowed it to come now?
The circumstances of when Rolf, he's visiting David in jail, and together they deciding to make the film that was Charlie's Country, and going into Ramingining, I said to Rolf, well, look, if you're going into Ramingining with David and working with the mob again, I'll come as well, because I'll come out with something. I don't know what it is, but I'll come out with a story. And in fact, Jim, there's even a third project in the country suite of projects, because we harvested so much material, and while each of the three projects are very they're independent of one another, they are also connected in some way.
Now, I'm very keen to know about the issues of design versus happenstance when you're making a documentary. And I want to cite two examples, one of which appears to be design, another one happenstance. You've got the Knowledge Centre sign sitting on the ground, discoloured, rotting. Why did you select that image, and what is it meant to say?
Okay, well, there's several things. My Matt, the cinematographer, is wonderful to work with. He's also a very restless creature. So while I'm sort of, standing around, talking to everyone, getting everything sorted, say, Molly, what can I do? And I'd say, oh, Matt, I'd send him off on diversions and distractions to things like, for example, I said, go and film Pussycat. He's painting, or Bobby up in the art centre, thinking it's unlikely we'll use that, but lo and behold, we do. And so it's about seeing bits and pieces on the way on our travels. And something like Knowledge Centre, I'd look at it and look at Matt, and Matt would go, Molly, I've got it. And you collect things. It's almost being a bit like a bowerbird, because you just don't know how they're going to inform your story when you're in the edit suite.
But of all the images and all the stuff that you had, what is that shot meant to tell us? The Knowledge Centre shot.
Oh, goodness. It's there. It's a part of the day when we do go into the rubbish. We've shot it that day. It's not something that comes from another place and time. And so when you're looking at building the images and having them tell their own visual story, you see that and you go, yes, that'll be a good break between them in the tip and them stepping into the bush. Or it's at that point in time, it's more about sequencing of images rather than, okay, we've got to use this Knowledge Centre shot. How do we do it?
It's also just brilliantly ironic and embodies so much of what the film is saying in one image.
And Jim, the fantastic thing is that we just started to show, school kids the film, and they respond so positively to it. And they get the ironies. They pop up questions and they say, how, with the tidy town, it's, because there's a shot of Ramingining was once a tidy town. The signs, decrepit and faded, and the town is not so tidy. And they'll point those things out and they'll pick it up. And yes, the irony and the contradictions are very much made through choice.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, so you've got a shot that was selected and chosen. Then you got the kangaroo coming into town, being chased by the dogs, and then meeting its fate behind that fence.
Now, this is the remarkable thing about documentary making. We basically had a rough cut. This was Tanya Nemi and I, and it was going back into Ramingining to just pick up the bits and pieces. We had a lot of streetscapes, but not enough infrastructure. Those sorts of things. Our first morning back, and it's early. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. The township's asleep, and we're there. There's Matt and Josh who'd come for sound on this second part, and we're there, and I sort of Matt's setting up, and I turn and I look and I see this kangaroo and these dogs, and there's some sort of standoff, and so I sort of turn and I say, Matt, and I sort of swung my finger around and pointed. Well, he picked up the tripod, the legs, and turned it around, pulled focus, and then just followed the kangaroo, who, for all the listeners, did meet a somewhat grisly fate. And I couldn't believe it as it was unfolding before my eyes. It was like, oh no, it was only supposed to hop through town. It wasn't supposed to hop into town and meet its demise. So those things are, it's what every documentary maker just kind of goes, oh, a lucky day.
Yes, but again, what's the function that piece of footage serves in the film, all those sequences, because it's cut into the film? You could have put that on the blooper reel. Hey, and here's something funny that happened, during the shoot. You've put it into the film. What's it saying?
Well, it's a slight spoiler. I can tell the audience that the kangaroo ends up being a sort of part of a family barbecue, and consumed later that day, and it speaks to so much the excitement of the mob. They're all out of bed. They're not normally out of bed, before 9 o'clock, but it's, by this time it's about 7 o'clock in the morning, and the excitement was palpable. And even the kids, because the elders, those who are, sort of over north of 40, they're going, my goodness, we're going to have a good feed today. And, they're so excited about it, because when they were kids, it was thrilling when their parents brought home a kangaroo. It meant that it was going to be a big, it was going to be a party day. Everyone would sit around and talk and laugh and enjoy good food. So it's so close to their times.
And it speaks of numbers of things for me. It speaks of what a foreign environment it really is, how different it is. It speaks of by the behaviour, it speaks of a loss of culture. because the reaction to the kangaroo is clearly not what it would have been in before Raminginning existed, so it has multiple meaning, and I think that's why it's in there.
Now, I swear to you that while I was watching this documentary, when the line comes up where Galpalo says, "We don't see rubbish, we don't understand it, everything comes from the bush, everything goes back to the bush," I wrote that down thinking, this is a great quote. Subsequently, I find out that everyone's quoting this line, but I want you to know that it struck me as well, without knowing that everyone else is going to friggin' quote it. So I'm not just regurgitating what I've read. That line does stick out. Why does it stick out so much that everyone is plucking it out and commenting on it?
Because it's a sudden understanding of it's a new way of looking at something that people thought they understand. Okay, Aboriginal people are untidy. Okay, they're all full of rubbish. Okay, now there's an understanding of stuff behind that, and you have to think differently about this. And I think that's why.
Now, you've kept your focus on the one location. I think the film is likely to be criticised for being too narrow and for maybe being too simplistic and for not covering issues like domestic violence and alcoholism more deeply, or going into the urban environment, for instance, where there are a whole other set of issues. Do you think that it would be a fair criticism?
I think anybody can make whatever criticism they like.
Yeah, but is it fair?
Look, this is David telling his story about his culture, and insofar as it applies to other mobs up there, it does, and insofar as it doesn't apply to other mobs up there, it doesn't.
And I would sort of add to that, which I would sort of say that that's not what the documentary's about. You know, the documentary was about the difference, but the clash between two cultures, and not so much how to reconcile it, but to give some insight to that. And thematically, we picked three really sort of three fundamental elements: time, rubbish, and money. And so that is how the documentary illustrates the points that David is trying to make.
Actually, 4 points. You've missed an important one. Sharing. The whole
Yes.
culture of sharing. But the whole issue of sharing counters, I think, the white Western response to a documentary like this about personal responsibility. One wonders whether, because I think that's an instinctive response people will have, well, what about personal responsibility? But the way that you have constructed this film questions that as a concept. Well, that's a concept for one culture, not necessarily for this culture. So it doesn't really apply.
Yes, yeah, I'd agree wholeheartedly with that. Yes, very much so.
And I think that was very much the intention of the film, is to try and show it from the inside, not what we want or what we think, but what they think, what David thinks and what the mob up there thinks. And it really was only possible because we've known them so long and done so much work with them. And then, it's a sort of constellation of circumstances that come together that give you that inside view. And the inside view is not that we talk about personal responsibility.